What is going on, everybody? Now this video is one of those things that I've been waiting to do, and I never really got my hands on this device because it just seemed kind of like a random one, and honestly not a lot of people were selling them, and those who were selling them were about like way over the price than I was willing to pay for it. And that device, if you couldn't tell by the title, was actually the Sony Xperia Play, and it was definitely an interesting thing for Sony to do. Now the specific device that I have does have a cracked screen. It isn't in the best condition, but this one was the best local one I could find because the ones on eBay were going for like $80 to $90, and that honestly is a lot to pay for a device that I'm planning never to use or anything. So I actually got this device for $20, and if I did plan on fixing the screen, then I would easily have gone to and probably done that, but there's just so many other problems with this device that I found out that I didn't even want to bother with it and everything. But another thing I want to note is I tried really extremely hard to get this thing to download emulators and like other games and stuff, but I just couldn't do it. Like even the stock Crash Bandicoot game needs an SD card, and I have like 45 SD cards, but none of them work for this device, so I don't really know what happened with it. I think the SD card reader might be broken or something, and it doesn't allow you to download any apps or anything like that without an SD card. So I can't even use it for anything. But like I said, in order to do anything with this phone, you need an SD card, and I can't get that working on here. And another thing is the Android market, which is the app store from like Android Gingerbread, also does not work on this thing. So I can't really do anything with it besides watch YouTube videos and stuff. But at this point, no one is really planning on using this thing as a daily driver. So this is not like a standard, is it worth it or whatever, because I guess in a way it is worth it because you can download emulators and stuff on it, but make sure it works. But as a whole, I would not recommend anybody buying this to use as an actual phone, but it's pretty cool how this thing pretty much stands out in the best way possible. Now the thing this thing shined at the time was hardware, and up until this point, I really haven't found a device a phone that really looks like this. There's been hundreds of devices that look like this because it's just a standard gaming keypad thing, but it was such an amazing touch. And at the time when I looked at it through photos because I couldn't afford it because I was like 12 years old or something. But I just can't believe that this device actually existed, because at the time there were so many devices and so many leaks and stuff that were like, oh, this is the next PlayStation phone, this is this and that. And this was never really, I guess, described or like marketed as a PlayStation phone, if that's the best way I could think about it, because maybe it was. A lot of people did say it was a PlayStation phone, but I think Sony never really directly outright said it, but they might have. Don't quote me on it, but from what I know, this was never really a PlayStation phone, because in a way it really wasn't, because without an emulator, you couldn't really play PSP games on this thing. It was mostly for some titles that were actually brought into this. I think there were some PSP exclusive titles that they did convert to Xperia Play, and this thing didn't really have like a PlayStation marketplace, but it did have a game marketplace which you could connect to and all that. But on my specific unit, I couldn't. I don't know why. I'm connected to the Wi-Fi and everything, but this thing just has so many problems that I can't even download any games on it or anything. But one thing I want to say is that when I was looking through the photos and stuff, even just like a couple weeks ago before I even like bought this, I thought the buttons were gonna feel super cheap, and I thought it was just gonna be like a really cheap phone altogether. But Sony really did a very good job building this phone and everything. I mean, the keys honestly feel way better than my PSP 2000s buttons, which is a very interesting thing because that's an actual dedicated console, where this thing is just like a phone that happened to have, gaming keys with it, which is really weird. So Sony really outdid themselves in terms of the hardware of this phone, and the rest of this body is kind of strange a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, but it did come out in 2011, so you do have to kind of keep that in mind when looking at it. But like I said, I could not get any emulators on this thing, but as far as I know, because Crash Bandicoot did run at full speed on this thing, because I looked at a lot of footage from other people who played it, I'm just gonna overlay footage of me playing it on this screen. So just know this isn't the actual gameplay, so my keypads whenever I'm typing are not going to match with what's going on in the screen, but that is okay. This is just for demonstration purposes. This is not an actual thing. I might play Spyro 2 later on, but just keep in mind that this is not an actual thing. But really the biggest problem wasn't that this phone had PSP game keys or anything like that. It wasn't that the screen was weird or the buttons were weird or anything. It was 100% crippled by the software of this phone. And like I said, the hardware was awesome at the time, and it still kind of is. The removable back, the removable battery, and the removable storage are all things that slowly have decreased and companies have taken out since then, but it also had the slide out keypad that I cannot get enough of, and I can't stress that enough how important that was But the worst thing is that this thing only got one version of Android. Now, could this phone still have been a huge flop and all that stuff without a version of Android? Well, technically, it wasn't really a flop. I think it was kind of important a little bit. Quite a few people did buy it, and it brought a lot of interest, and a lot of people did reviews and stuff. But I don't necessarily have an answer to say that if it got another version of Android, it would have been 100 times better or anything. But I do know that a lot of the problems that people were having initially and all those things would have definitely been fixed had this thing gotten an ice cream sandwich. For example, the first Nexus phone that came out, which was the Nexus 1, which I also have, had a fairly long life, and it had a pretty decent, and still kind of does have a third-party dev community, which is fairly large. But even though this one had root and custom ROM access, the Xperia Play, it just didn't have a long life after it. You know, nobody brings this up into conversations like this was a crazy phone or anything like that, like how people bring up the Nexus 1 or even the first Samsung Galaxy. And now I kind of do have a theory behind this, and maybe it's because Sony phones aren't really too popular in America, and maybe in other countries around the world people do bring up this phone because Sony phones are a little bit more, you know, talked about and bought there. But this phone in a way didn't get enough credit that it deserved, if that makes any sense. But at the same time, it really didn't bring anything crazy to the table. It didn't really push a market. I mean, nobody has made a phone like this since then, including Sony. So maybe they did something right or maybe they did something wrong, but it just didn't really have an impact after the fact. I mean, at the time it was just kind of like a clickbait thing, like, all right, everybody's gonna go and rush to the store and grab it, but it didn't really have an impact. And I feel like it really had so much potential. You know, we could have definitely had a shift in the gaming industry a little bit. I mean, mobile gaming is crazy. People have tons and tons of games, Fortnite, PUBG, all these things, but everybody has to use Bluetooth controllers. How crazy could it have been if this same kind of like layout was brought over to maybe even an iPhone, and then iPhones had like slide out keypads or something? And I think it's kind of a push on the gaming manufacturers to not have that out, because that would kind of interfere with the gaming platform. Because if that was the case, nobody will go out and buy a PSP or a Nintendo DS or anything. And I kind of think Sony saw that too, because at the time, maybe they saw, okay, this is a cool concept and we got it out and it's a phone, but people are buying more of these than PSPs. And I don't know which one was more expensive. Maybe PSPs were bigger at the time, and maybe Sony saw like, we can't really supply these many phones and there's really not much of a future for it. So let's only drop one. Let's just drop support altogether and let's just focus more on the PSPs. And I don't know if the PSP Go was sold at the time too. I think it came out in 2010 or something, but the PS Vita came out after this, and I definitely see how the PSP Go influenced this, or vice versa, the Xperia Play influenced the PSP Go. And I do think, you know, because Sony definitely made the PSPs and all that stuff, they definitely saw that people were buying this over the PSP and they didn't want that. So I think that's why they kind of stepped back a little bit. But even then, if this phone got one more version of Android, we might have seen a push of something like this, of hardware gaming buttons, because this phone would have became a little bit more relevant. People were saying that this phone was getting ice cream sandwich, which was Android 4.0, but it never did. I think Sony backed out of it. But even now, I mean, I've owned pretty much every PSP at this point, and this would make it way more convenient for me to play games, even with just an emulator. And game manufacturers could have really used these keypads to kind of push more people to go into more of the mobile gaming aspect. I mean, we have like gaming phones at this point, you know, we have all these different gaming phones, but we don't necessarily have like phones with slide out keypads, but maybe we shouldn't, you know. But what I'll say is I'm definitely glad I got my hands on one. It's an interesting phone, no doubt, but it really didn't push any boundaries that it could have. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Nextbit Robin in a way, if you guys remember that phone. It had huge promises. They said it was going to do this and that, but it really under-delivered, and I don't really think we're going to see another Nextbit Robin, and we're probably never going to see another Sony PlayStation portable phone like this or whatever. But I am getting the Nextbit Robin, so stay tuned for that. You know, I'll definitely make a video about that once I get it. But yeah, this phone really didn't push too many boundaries, which is kind of sad. It was really, really cool at the time, but I think it was more so kind of a clickbait thing, like I've stated already. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it at. If you guys have any questions or any concerns whatsoever, please feel free to comment in the comment section. And I don't say this often, but if you guys want to see a phone that you want reviewed on this channel or anything like that, definitely leave a comment about it too. If you guys want to like them or something so you can get more of my attention, definitely feel free to like a comment or something, because I am trying to get more phones and stuff. I'm just trying to make way more videos, so having your input on these things really do help. Definitely feel free to like this video, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button, which is very important to me, which helps this channel grow. We're actually still doing the iPhone 6s and iPhone SE giveaway, so if you're interested in a new phone or anything like that, I got you covered. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Both those links are down in the description, so make sure you enter that. I really don't see why you wouldn't enter, because it's completely free and I'm giving you a phone. So if you're chosen, though, it's not just everybody's getting it. I'm choosing people at random. There's a link in the description for a video about it too, but while you're down there, check out the other links too. That'll mean so much. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.